I just want to thank everyone that left comments on my last video congratulating me on my new job and on graduating university. Just know that I do read your guys' comments, and it's cool to see that some of you do like to stay to the end of the videos to hear little updates about the channel. So make sure to comment what you think about these Drag Race verses down below. And of course, give this video a like if you can.
That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Reggie Rochu is probably the most influential challenge that the franchise has ever had. The reason I say that is because when you really put everything into perspective, this moment really set the series towards a direction that's been pretty hard to change in terms of just how referential it's become to us as viewers. Although there's more than just a few reasons for why Reggie Rochu changed the game. But before we start, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to help entrepreneurs and creators build a standout online presence. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed. They combine years of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology, making it easier than ever to create a stunning personalized website tailored to your unique vision. I've been blown away by how simple it is to build a site that fits your brand aesthetic to a T. Here's some of what they offer that could pique your interest. First is, as mentioned before, design intelligence that will help guide you step by step, meaning if you're not a designer, you can build something beautiful and professional in no time. Plus, you'll get custom curated content and visuals that match your brand aesthetic effortlessly. Then we have Squarespace Payments. If you're selling products, services, or content, this is a game changer. It's easy to set up, and you can offer your customers flexible payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, or Afterpay. Whether you want a sleek and modern look or something bold and creative, these tools make it so easy to customize every detail. Are you ready to bring your vision to life? Head to squarespace.com for a free trial and click the link in the description to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now, let's begin. Throughout the first 8 years since season 1, Drag Race challenges had always been pretty diverse. They leaned towards comedy, they had their fashion moments, as well as the occasional out of left field challenge that tended to be a nice surprise for us fans. When it comes to the origin of Drag Race Versus, some consider the season 6 90s themed challenge, Oh No She Better Don't, as one of the earliest editions of the format. Yet, while it's true that each queen did have to come up with their own verses, it came across more like a cute little challenge that wasn't anywhere near what we'd go on to witness in just 2 years. Here's why. The day the All-Stars 2 finale aired was one of the tensest moments of the franchise up until that point. It was the closing chapter of one of the most dramatic seasons ever. Although at that point, we had grown accustomed that when it came to finales, it was more of a formal celebratory moment rather than a full-blown event. Now, of course, I don't need to remind you about the context of this episode. Alaska was the least supported queen because people were mad about her eliminating fan favorites, favoring her friends, and being a tiny bit hypocritical, while Katya was by a landslide the queen people wanted to see get crowned. The idea to have each queen perform their own verse on the main stage with the addition of background dancers elevated the presence they had on screen. I mean, quite literally, the gags that they did, like Katya being lifted everywhere, Detox doing choreography while walking on a bunch of chairs, Alaska literally owning her portion of the song, and Roxy Andrews. This was the first time that we had seen the main stage being used in such a way. What's more is that the queens went into this challenge completely blind. So what they'd each write about was truly genuine. I mean, let's take Alaska for example. She chose to use her time slot to pay as many references to previous Drag Race moments as a way of sort of saying, hey, I'm a super fan, and if you crown me, you'll be represented in a way that upholds the entire legacy of the franchise. Yet one thing that always left me wondering though, was why she decided to paint herself blue like a Smurf. But I just assumed it was because she wanted to visually stand out from the rest of the contestants. When it came to Roxy, while now people celebrate her for the icon that she is, by the time we got to her top 4 verse, it was a pretty defeating moment. I mean, after we saw 3 really good performances, hers just fell completely flat, similar to how she did in the competition. All of that being said, it only took a couple months after the airing of the season for people to look back at it with a more playful lens, making it just as memorable as Alaska or Katya's when you really think about just how often people reference it. On the other hand, Detox had a more so forgettable showcase with her verse. It sort of acts as an example to not downplay yourself when trying to represent your brand. They don't directly critique her on this, but to say, quote, I ain't saying I'm the best, but I ain't the worst, is just a nice way of saying you're mediocre, which undersells a lot of what she delivered since, based on her track record, she was actually in second place behind Alaska. Yet to the fan base, if Rijirochu proved anything, was that Katya had the strongest performance of this finale, leaving everybody gagged. I truly consider Katya's verse among the top 2, or just straight up the best verse to have ever been delivered. There's just so many layers to this that's made it really difficult for anyone else to replicate. For starters, there's a lot of tying into her drag character, like her being a Russian hooker, the super long name, etc. Yet it was also the actual lyricism behind it. I mean, quote, Lenin in the streets, Dostoevsky in the sheets, baby are you ready for this cold war, is so beyond what any other girl has ever done till today. To put it into perspective, if any other queen had delivered the same verse, it just wouldn't have made the same impact because it truly represents Katya to a T. Especially when we consider that the opening line in itself was jarring, with her sounding out her name followed by, but your dad just calls me Katya. Essentially, going into this blind added so much creative value to what each of the contestants brought. What it additionally did was prove just how polished and secure they were about both their stance in the competition and in their drag personas in itself. So naturally, given just how successful Rijirochu was, it made sense the production would want to reincorporate it moving forward to highlight future queens' talents too. Many people don't know this since sometimes the details get lost over the years, but when All Stars 2 was in the middle of airing, Season 9 was in the middle of filming. It's important to note this because while Season 9's top 4 was the second time we as an audience saw the use of the Rijirochu format again, only this time with the Category Is song, what was sort of interesting is that none of the contestants on Season 9 had actually seen All Stars 2 yet. So in their minds, they must have thought they were truly breaking new ground, since every top 4 or 3 up until that point tended to just film a music video for RuPaul. What this in turn provides us is the unique opportunity to analyze Season 9's verse challenge as one that wasn't yet affected by performances of the past, because they were also on the exact same boat as the girls on All Stars 2, even though they filmed theirs over a year prior. What's more is that in terms of the stage setup, they pretty much maintained the same format, keeping the stage at a minimal and giving the girls their own background dancers. So then, what's there to note about the Category Is episode? Well, for starters, Shea Coulee's verse was something that was on a league of its own. To this day, I find myself saying, quote, look at the edges I've snatched today. It proved that Category Is, while not better, was still a pretty great follow-up to the Rijirochu song. Then of course we have Trinity the Tuck's verse that wasn't all that well received by viewers. The lyrics just didn't roll off the cuff the way the others did. And so it's at this point that a new addition in terms of the way the fanbase rated these performances was born. Clearly, out of every group, there will always be that one verse that's not as good as the others. Essentially, Trinity was the Roxy of the top 4 challenge, something that she tried to redeem when she got to do it again in her All-Star seasons. Emphasis on try. At this point, the only weird part about this challenge was that despite it being a very high-effort performance, the judges would never actually pick a winner for the week. So oftentimes, even if you were the best, it wouldn't go towards your track record, something that was still a big benefit because it contributed to why someone was deserving of winning the crown. But we'll get to why that was confusing in just a second. As for Sasha Velour's case, what's interesting about her approach in this challenge is that she's able to turn even what should be a moment where one sells themselves into one that also acts as an educational moment. I mean, after all, Sasha was the first queen to ever be smart. Regardless, it's important to note that this is the first verse we see someone go beyond just talking about themselves at an individual level to also talking directly to the audience and trying to inspire everyone watching. I mean, telling people to experiment with their gender expression, requesting that if you want to join the drag revolution, you must be innovative and try to offer something different, was something that I think had more impact than people realize, especially with the whole be the strange you wish to see in the world, a play on the famous phrase be the change you wish to see in the world. So anyways, the key takeaways here is that after Category Is, it subsequently sets a new precedent moving forward. It was no longer a one-off challenge, and it ushered in a new excitement for the top 4 episodes that just wasn't there there when all they had to do was take part in a cheap music video to advertise one of RuPaul's new songs. The next two inductees into the Final Four verse challenge came with All Stars 3 and season 10. The reason I'm mentioning them together is because both these seasons were filmed right after each other. So while neither one of these groups got to see what the other performed, both of them did get to watch what the queens did for All Stars 2 and season 9 with their respective songs. Essentially, this was the first edition where contestants had an actual blueprint to go off of, being directly inspired by previous verses. So they didn't go into it blind. What we also see is production themselves wanting to elevate the whole thing even further. I mean, season 10's had a much wider set build, with way more theatrical effects going on that was actually super impressive to see when it first started. Even the performance outfits begin to look more opulent, with for example Aquaria's look, that contrasted a lot when you compare it to the basic black bodysuits that queens had been choosing to go with up until that point. All that being said, if we consider how All Stars 3 Kitty Girl music video also had a pretty big production behind it by going all around the backstage area, in many ways World of Wonder kinda drove themselves into a corner with just how much they elevated the challenge within such a short amount of time. In terms of the songs themselves, American is truly one of the best additions we have gotten, even just with the chorus sang by Ru about what it means to be an American as a queer person. It also came as season 10 was the first main season to be filmed under Trump's first administration, so it was a stance for the community to maintain their unity. The Kitty Girl song is also among the top 3 best finale verse challenges, but in a very different way. It was a lot more of a really campy approach, where instead of trying to inspire, they built themselves up and paid references to their own brand. As a quick side note that's still important to cover is that while I've mostly been focusing on the Final Fours, it's actually All Stars 3 that introduces the concept of girl groups. This was the first time that this format, something that many considered to be only reserved for those making it to the end of the competition, was now something that more of the cast would be able to participate in. We see this in the All Stars 3 Return of the Queen episode, where the eliminated queens formed one group, the remaining queens formed another, and their prompt was to sort of parody girl groups like the Spice Girls, that each had a clear character and aesthetic. It's here, I think, that production made a new sort of category, with a clear visual separation. The girl groups would have substantially less effort put into their staging, while the top 4 verse had a higher degree of effort being made for their actual sets. So knowing all that, what's next? Well, after this point, the future queens to partake in this challenge had a scope of 4 different editions to look at in order to figure out what to do, or what not to do in the cases of some. Even though these challenges had been consistently good, it's All Stars 4 that was the first time that by the time we got to the final verse challenge, it was surprisingly pretty boring. For some reason, instead of keeping the original beat for the song Super Queen, they instead went with this weird synth version that ended up being really forgettable. Could it mean that we were reaching a limit in terms of how many times this challenge format could be used? Or was it normal that occasionally someone was gonna be missing the mark? Well, once we get to season 11, another big shift starts to happen. At this point, the audience was trained to expect by the end of the season to get a fun remix of one of Ru's existing songs that we'd be able to listen to on streaming services. Yet, this particular episode raised a very pressing question. Just for context, on season 9 and 10, each member of the top 4 did their verse, got critiqued on them, but ultimately all of them would move forward to the finale. Yet for season 11, they did it for the top 5 challenge, and it actually resulted in a bottom 2 with Miss Vanjie being eliminated, which was very confusing, because if it meant that these verse challenges were now truly competitive, then why wasn't Evie Oddly, who by a landslide had the best verse, getting showered in positive critiques, not given the challenge win? I mean, it would have helped to add a little more of an argument for why she'd go on to get the crown, given that she ended up going into the finale with just one paired win that she got with Scarlet Envy on episode 2. And the verse challenge could have allowed her to go in with 2 wins under her belt, but that didn't end up happening. In the next couple of years, verse challenges along with girl group challenges would become key staples in the franchise, with even international franchises taking part in it. One of my favorite ones was the All Stars 5 I'm in Love episodes, where each queen needed to pick a celebrity crush. In just a moment, I'm gonna discuss how verses now follow a very generic format. But before that, it's important that we acknowledge how much potential exists if you give a queen an actual concept to go with the song. I mean, a big reason why I like this edition is because we don't have a bunch of queens saying how great they are. It instead consists of them saying references to pop culture that relates to their given celebrity, resulting in a much more layered set of lyrics. Nevertheless, most of the time that we see these challenges happen, there is no concept to give them. That's sort of where the issues lie in the now modern era, all these years after. I mean, it really seems like they just throw these queens on the stage and tell them to make a verse that properly represents their brand, when most of the time, these queens don't have a brand per se. They're just living their lives. It's why Drag Race UK season 6 girl group, where they had a theme of Halloween/monster, became such a hit with the fans. It gives them so much more material to work with. Plus, production should realize that most of these queens didn't go to post-secondary, so there's only so many words they know. At least give them a thesaurus. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see just how monumental of a challenge was the Riju Roju performance, especially for the longevity of the series. While yes, it's harder to find verses that really feel original nowadays, it's still super fun to see the newer queens participate in it. But what do you think? Is there ways production can make this more refreshing? What was the first verse or girl group challenge that you watched? Let me know in the comments. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. If you want to help support the channel, make sure to click the link in the description to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain at Squarespace. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sarit Tish, Natasha De Leon, Las Bocitas, Cool Gal Nan, and Jetsam Adams. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry or Diesel Placer, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch But a Keek, Jack Beck, Bashir with the Good Beard, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Max Whale, Olivia Marr, and Dea. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and give it a like and comment if you want to help support the growth of the channel. I'll see you guys next time.